I came into the business to just do some rental properties. By default, then went into development, and then by further default, started to do design and then architecture for clients. So I never came into it to be either a developer or to have a design studio.
Is there a ballpark number of how much you've done in terms of development over the 60 odd projects that you've done that you openly share?
Uh, I mean, we've sold over 30 million pounds of stock.
Hey, Alan, first of all, thank you so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. You've got an amazing amount of experience in a very specialist niche, which is a very competitive sector, but you do something very different and very, as I said, very niche compared to many other people in that sector. For those people that maybe don't know you, tell us a little bit about the kind of things you do and where you're based.
Okay, first of all, Saj, this is my first what I call official podcast. So if I don't come across very well and all the rest of it, then please forgive me. And I say that also to the listeners, but I will endeavor to do my best. If I give you a little story, if that's all right, of how who I am and how I got started, I'll keep it as brief as possible. But that way, at least you've got an idea, and so of course the viewers. So thanks very much, Saj. And just to give you a little bit about myself, so I started in property just over 20 years ago, and everybody in property has a different strategy, different skill sets, different motivation, different ambitions. And my initial ambition was to start building up a small portfolio of rental properties, which I started. My first one was south of the Elephant and Castle, and that was a two-bed flat for £55,000, which obviously would be a lot more today. I then continued to buy a few more, and then I got to a stage where I couldn't get the rental income I wanted. So I thought, well, maybe I can sell it for a small profit. And I managed to do that. And on that property, all I'd done was give a lick of paint. I had confiscated the cans of Guinness from my two decorators who were Irish, so it's enabled them to concentrate on the decorating rather than drinking, and put in a new carpet, a cheap carpet, and got rid of all the weeds in the garden and managed to sell it for a small profit. So I thought this is interesting. I then started to buy one or two things to renovate, very simple. And then I bought two floors above an off license in Fulham. And you may not immediately appreciate how clever I am, because on that first proper development, I only had to move the location for the kitchen three times. So I was clever enough to realize that I did not know what I was doing. So eventually I felt I got it right. And before I put it on the market, I actually got a feng shui specialist to check it. And she was happy with it because for me, what I started to understand, it was about the flow of space. And we eventually sold them relative to the market quite well, because what I straight away understood, it didn't matter how good the finishes were, if the layout was no good, it was still rubbish. You know, a lot of people concentrate, especially on development, on the finishes, etc. But for me, the finishes, sorry, the layout is the most important part. I then bought a couple of flats in Notting Hill, and they were two-bed flats when I bought them. And I did something strange for a new developer. I turned them not into three beds, but actually into one bed. And again, why did I do that? Because the layout and the space worked much better. This was a really steep learning curve because the freeholder didn't want to do any work to the common parts, to the outside of the building. It was all falling a bit to bits, a little bit. So I had to tie up the outside, redecorate the outside, redecorate at my own expense, the common parts going up to the first floor because I had the ground and first floor apartments. When I'd finished them, Sienna Miller, the actress, bought one and somebody else bought another. And again, relative to the market, we did quite well. Then I started to go up market, and 2009, I did a project in Belgravia, not far from Hyde Park Corner. Some of your listeners, viewers may have experienced going around there. Not easy to navigate. Very, very busy roundabout. And this was an old mews house. Now, the mews houses were the houses built and developed for the larger mansions in Belgravia for the horses. So horses were on the ground floor, and I think probably the lads were upstairs. And now, of course, they're luxury properties. And this particular one, it just had windows at the front. So the game of a developer is obviously how to change the negatives to a positive. So what I did is I took out a rear corner of the property, put a glass retractable roof, and then a 10.5 meter waterfall going down to a Zen garden. And when people saw it from the outside, it was a little bit like the TARDIS in Doctor Who, because when they opened the door, they weren't expecting to see what they saw. And this property, I had it under offer to the actress Nicole Kidman, met with her. Then she got pregnant, changed her mind, and then she sold it to a French entrepreneur. But with this property, we won Best Interior Design in the country and Best Development in London. So then what happened was people came to me and said, Alan, we like what you do. Can you do work for us? So the point I just want to explain is I came into the business to just do some rental properties. By default, then went into development, and then by further default, started to do design and then architecture for clients. So I never came into it to be either a developer or to have a design studio. And a lot of businesses evolve like that. And in total, we've done 34 projects as a developer, as principal, and over 60 projects for different types of clients, some private, some other investors, and some other developers. So a complete mixture of simple refurbishment, consultancy work, troubleshooting, property staging, and general advice.
So, Alan, one thing that you mentioned there, which stood out to me, is how you use space. So, for example, with the kitchen, you were talking about getting the kitchen layout right. You're prepared to move it 3 times to try and get it right in terms of what would work. And often these buildings that you're working in, they might be 100+ years old. They weren't designed to be used the way they maybe are being used today. So you're kind of thinking about the importance of space, and particularly when you mention taking a 3 bedroom property to a 1 bedroom property, that can be quite a scary decision for a developer to make. What was your thinking around that and your confidence of being able to get this right and it would work?
Well, I think first of all, if you got your developer hat on, at the end of the day, in basic terms, all you're doing is creating a widget to flog. And that doesn't matter whether you're in Belgravia, Battersea, Balham, or Bradford. I was actually born in Bradford, so I can speak very highly of Bradford. The layout is as important in one location as another. And the thing about layout, you have to, well, if it's a new build, you've got obviously a clean sheet of paper. But even so, we've looked at projects done by other developers and other architects, and where we would have done the layout in a very different way. Because, and I say this with the greatest respect, designers are designers, architects are architects, but as a developer, you in essence are the conductor of the orchestra and have to be put your minds into that of a potential buyer, because there's no point doing something which everybody else thinks is really whizzy, and then the sales agent comes in when it's finished and they're thinking, why did they do that? And scratching their heads. The use of the space is so important. And I call it all about the dog. And this is perhaps a bit sophisticated for some people. I say that sort of tongue in cheek. But the dog has a tail. Either the tail is wagging the dog or the dog is wagging the tail. And what I mean by that is some investors or new developers, they bring in whizzy architects, whizzy interior designers who then tell them what they think they should have. And that's what I call the tail wagging the dog, as against the developer who's the conductor of the orchestra having their own vision and then instructing and directing their design team to then bring in what they think is needed for the project. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you're going to have good, healthy debates, discussions, arguments, whatever you want to call it, with your design team. But at the end of the day, sometimes you'll come up with the ideas, sometimes they'll come up with the ideas. But the thing is to have a vision so you know in which direction you're going. Since I've got my own design team, when somebody comes for an interview, and I'm sure many of your viewers have interviewed designers, interior designers, or architects in the past, and what happens, they come with their beautiful portfolio, which is always generally very impressive because they're showing you the best work that they've done. But what I really want to understand is how they think. And that I found it the best way to work that out is to give them an unmodernized property to come back to me a week later to show me how they would reorganize the space. And you'd be terrified to see how many professionals don't really have that skill set. Not in the way, in any case, that we need it in the intricate spaces sometimes that we have to work towards. And finding people who have that skill set is a real nugget to have, and don't let them go because it's very, very valuable. And don't take it for granted that people who have studied for a few years, or in some cases many years, have that understanding, that feeling, that finesse. Does that help answer the
Occasionally,
question?
yes, yes, it does. So occasionally a designer or an architect will create something that looks absolutely stunning. It's very outside of the box, very, very different. But as the conductor, how do you then make a decision? For example, a 10-foot, a 10-meter waterfall is going to be a sensible thing to do on a muse house. How do we know that's not going too far and it's going to turn some people off?
That's a very good question. So the atrium was the design feature, right, to let in the light because especially in refurbishments and especially with houses, introducing as much light as possible is to me really, really important. The second thing came of what did we do with that space? How could we make it look more interesting? And that's why we decided to put in a water feature with a little water Zen garden at the bottom. So, the thing about very high value property, such as we find in London, nobody needs to buy or rent any of these properties. They already have a roof over their head. And it becomes very much an emotional purchase. And if they don't like what they see, they don't say to the sales agent, would they take a discount? They say, what else do you have? Also, it's important to understand that as animals, as we're all animals, we're all not motivated, but we all have different senses. So some people are visual, Some people about smell, some people about taste, some people about touch, and some people about hearing. So again, if we're staging a property, of course, what does it look like? What music do you have on? What temperature is it? What smells do you have? Etc., etc. So it's a whole holistic approach, you know.
It's very interesting you make that point. As properties we've renovated over the years, I've always thought about the visual impact it will have in the few minutes that somebody will be in that property making a decision, whether it's right or not for them. As you said, it's emotional. And then I think we took it a step further by thinking about what they touch, door handles, what they're walking on, the carpet. But I've never really thought about things like the temperature, the smell, the sounds, as you mentioned. I hadn't even considered those things, but you're absolutely right. They could make such a difference to how somebody feels as they go around that property.
If you allow me just to add to that,
Yes.
you talked about minutes. I talk about seconds because people make many decisions, as you have yourself when you've looked at a property, and the viewers will have done before they open the door. Yeah. Of course, opening the door is very important, but already you're creating an image in your own mind. So, to give you a couple of examples of the sort of things that I've done, and bear in mind this is for high-end properties. So, in the Muse House, for instance, that I was talking about where we did the waterfall, it had huge hinges on the doors for the horses. So I got these hinges, and the hinges were about a meter long, right? So I got these hinges dipped and chromed, and you'll these are the only chromed hinges in this part of London called Belgravia that you'll find. Nobody else has done that. Again, just to give that sense of arrival and making whatever you can look to best as possible. Another property where we put planters outside. The road was uneven, so we had these planters made to measure the right color, made that we wanted, and we had these screwed into the wall so they wouldn't slant. And another property in Notting Hill, the it had a gate going into a little courtyard before you then went to the property, and we had a nice handle put on the gate, but behind the gate we had a compressor. This compressor was color coded to the color of the gate and cost quite a lot of money. For the two compressors color coded, it cost about £800. But it then gave a really nice feeling when you opened that gate and closed automatically. So that first sense, that first touch was, reinforced the quality. And then I had a logo designed for the number of the property. Again, it cost quite a lot of money. But again, I could have gone down to B&Q and bought the two numbers, number 76. But again, it sends messages. And then we use this logo on the doormat when you went into the property. Also, we used the logo on the crockery that we had made from porcelain from a special factory outside Manchester. We then had bathrobes and towels done with the logo. And then you're going to think I'm a bit nuts now, and especially the viewers might think I'm a bit nuts. I found a company in America to put the logo on toilet paper.
Okay.
So we had these rolls of toilet paper with the logo
With the
of the
logo on them.
house. Now, again, you think this is stupid waste of money, but as I said, different people are motivated by different things, and you don't know which touch points people are going to
Yes.
go
Yeah.
to. So,
It
you know,
strikes me that you have exceptional attention to detail with these properties, particularly with the planters, having to adjust them very slightly so they still look level, but actually you've created something that just looks visually perfect and feels really nice as well. As you said, it appeals to different people as you go around. Often as developers, we think about, okay, we need to make a profit here as well. And it sounds like some of the projects you're doing, the budgets might be substantial on those. Is there a point where you draw a line and say, no, this gets, let us know the kind of range of property figures we're talking about as well. But is there a point where the budget is, no, this is too much. We can't really do things like that. Where do you draw the line?
So yes, absolutely, there is. I was stopped from putting a fish tank in one of the properties that I wanted to do
Okay.
by the bank, but I come back to what I call bang for your buck,
Mm,
and where you have an opportunity of getting an additional price based on having an exceptional product, then it's potentially worth doing. You know, I might add, if a lady wants to buy a handbag, she doesn't have to go into Louis Vuitton to buy the bag.
mhm.
It's an emotional desire.
Yes.
And when she goes into Louis Vuitton and she sees the bag that she likes, but not in the color she likes, she doesn't haggle with the salesperson to say, I like the bag, but not the color, can I have a discount.
Mhm.
She'll go across the road to Gucci or uh, somewhere else
Yeah.
to get something else. And the same with property. Now, putting that to one side, I think, because you talked about costs, right? It costs the same amount of money to put one color on the wall as another color.
Mm.
The question is which color? Good
Yes.
design does not need to cost money, a lot of money. It can be done to whatever the budget is for that project, but it's how you use the money. If you take a simple thing like flooring, if you have the luxury for wide, solid planks, fantastic. But if you don't have that budget and you have to use veneered planks and thinner, again, brilliant. But obviously the question is, what is the right color? And different properties suit different colors, and a lot of that is to do with the light. We had a client, and they had about 20 properties to sell in Victoria, not far from Buckingham Palace, and they weren't selling. And they asked me to go and have a look because one of them knew the sorts of work that we did, and it's not something that we generally do for clients. And we went to have a look, and basically the properties were not presented properly. They weren't staged properly. And the clients came over to see us and they said, Alan, do you think you can help? And I said, yes. And they said, well, what do you suggest? And because I think we're pretty good at what we do, and because I come from Yorkshire, I said, I don't know. And they said, what do you mean you don't know? So I said, well, with due respect, how can we advise you what we should do until we sat down with the selling agent and understand the profile of the buyer? And he said, that's interesting. None of the other design companies have said that. They just shows their pretty stuff. So we got the instruction. The first thing I wanted to do was to change the wall color. Now, the wall color was an off-white, so you might think, oh, well, leave it, it's all right. But it wasn't quite right. And I come back to this emotional presentation and this holistic approach. And I said to my design team, use the color we used on another property because it looked amazing. They put that color on the wall in this property, didn't look good at all. And the reason being is ceiling heights and light. Different colors look different on different properties. We eventually got that right. And the previous designers had spent £60,000 on the furniture for a two-bed flat. We spent £30,000 on the furniture for a two-bed flat. We were there to help sell the flat. They were there to help sell the furniture because, of course, they were making money from the furniture. Coming back to your point, because I was slightly digressing, and just on those, we helped sell all the properties in the building, and some of the clients actually then used us to help us with their own property. So it was a nice little side business to do, and we can help other investors and developers with their own scheme should they need. But it's not about chucking money at the wall, and often less is more. And what I mean by that, for instance, the tiling in a bathroom. People, automatically think, oh, you've got to tile the whole bathroom. But actually, if you just tile certain features of the bathroom, it actually enforces the power of the tiling that you're using. And it has a much stronger impact. And then you can always put a picture or whatever on the other walls or hooks for the bathrobes. Another example is on a project which we specified apart from the kitchen, and sat down with a builder, and he said, going through all the costs and everything, he said, who are you using for your kitchen? So I said, well, who do you use? And he said, well, I use Bob round the corner. I said, well, if Bob's good enough for you, it's good enough for me. And he said, yeah, but you haven't seen their work. I said, it's not important, because for me, a kitchen is a carcass and a door. So as long as you're happy with the quality of that, everything else you can specify: the hinges, the closers, the worktops, the backsplash, and the appliances. Because more often than not, when the kitchen comes to site, there's always a cupboard that doesn't fit. So you want to have what I call a line of least resistance and have a good rapport with between the builder and their suppliers to limit the issues which are going to flag up, because things always flag up. And if you allow me to explain why they always flag up, it's very simple. Imagine what we do is like designing and manufacturing a brand new luxury motor car that's never been designed or manufactured before, but we're building it in an old factory. So, because of that, we have a number of problems, obstacles, challenges, issues to sort out. Obviously, you need to have a good team to sort those out during the process. And it doesn't matter whether it's a one-bedroom flat or a block of 100 apartments. The problems will be similar, and you can have a nightmare on the one-bed flat, but an easy time on a 100-unit flat scheme, because you have an excellent team on the one and a terrible team on the other. The one thing that we do not have, that the car companies have, which means that we have these things to sort out, is a prototype. They have a prototype to sort out all their issues in advance of going in production. We don't have that luxury. So no matter how good the design is, how tight the specification is, how professional the tender document is, how tight the contract is, how good the builder is, how professional the professional team is, there will always be things to sort out. Otherwise, we wouldn't need a site meeting, and otherwise, for the contract, we wouldn't need a contract administrator.
Yes. I know some of the projects that you work on are basements, particularly in prime areas of London. That must come with additional complications over and above of trying to work on a property anyway. So, what sort of challenges does that present? And I'm assuming it also requires much bigger budgets to develop underground.
So that's a really good question, and again, it comes back to the team. Do you have a good team? Um, One project we did, which was on an estate next to Buckingham Palace, we were only allowed to use very light machinery and no conveyor belt. We had to bag the whole thing up. And this was 3.2 ceiling height of basement we had to dig out. It was uh, a marathon. Um, Obviously, having a good structure engineer, because there will always be things to sort out, is essential. BBC television did a program which your viewers could see if they Google it, called Millionaire Basement Wars. This was done a few years ago. They can probably find it on the YouTube, etc.
Yeah, it is on YouTube. I've watched it. Yes.
Okay, and I was the developer they used for that program because basically they wanted to find somebody who understood to turn the negatives to positive. I've also just concentrating on the construction side before I talk about the design. I've also cut corners insofar, not intentionally, but appointed a basement company to do the basement works who came in with a very good price to then work alongside the main contractor once the basement was done. And there I came massively unstuck. The basement company went bust. Took probably twice as long as it should have done. It was a complete nightmare. My suggestion would be to have the main contractor responsible for the basement company so that you don't have that problem of one finishing not correctly and the other starting and not having any argy-bargy. You know, yes, you can cut some costs potentially by having separate things, but my view is it then comes to bite you in the bottom later on because you in my view you need to have one conductor of the orchestra, especially when you're doing sophisticated developments because you think you're saving money, but in the end, from my own experience, I haven't. Keys to doing good basements, ceiling heights. I'd put in a minimum of 2.75 up to 3.2. The idea is to make the area of the basement as good, if not better quality than the rest of the property. The thing to remember about a basement, it's the only floor where if you have one staircase going down to it, which you've then got the whole floor plate. You don't have to put separate rooms down there. So you could walk down to the basement and it could be, wow, the whole floor plate of the house, depending, of course, what you wanted to do. The other question is light. Obviously, ceiling heights help give that feeling of an atrium and space. But secondly, having voids at ground floor. Yes, you will lose a bit of space, but you'll then create that drama. Obviously, if you're having voids, you need to then be conscious of fire regulations, whether you need a sprinkler system, fire doors, or a fire curtain. Again, you need to take the relevant advice. But, basements can be, or in London, as we call them, lower ground floors, uh, can be, fantastic parts of the home. And the key is, when people go down there, they say, oh, this doesn't feel like a basement. And you can see examples on our website of some of the wacky basements that we've done.
There's some amazing ones. We'll share some of those pictures as well. When you're creating something like that, you can almost really push the ceiling price of what a property will be able to command. And I'm guessing in Belgravia, some of those figures are very high. But if you're trying to develop in Birmingham or Bradford, how can you take those kind of thoughts and principles, knowing actually there's a limit in terms of how much somebody is going to be prepared to pay for that property?
Well, I mean, again, that comes to bang for your buck. And, on new build properties, lower to mid market, you would never find a basement because financially it just doesn't make sense. Um, you know, uh, Basement costs, if you think of construction finishes, professional fees, possibly at a bare minimum, on a cleared site, all in 350 a foot up to say 650 a foot. Yeah,
Wow, very high costs. Yeah.
yeah.
And
So
so in London, where the values are very high, it makes sense to do that. And so, do you see the opportunity for a developer or somebody who's, for example, either already developing or thinking about developing? Do you think the biggest opportunities are the higher end of the higher value properties, or do you think actually there's enough room to make good products and good money, more mid-range or even entry-level properties?
Sarge, there's a very good expression: cater for the masses, dine with the classes.
Hmm.
So it's really horses for courses. I think the main thing is understanding your market,
Yes.
because as you could do something in a high-end market at very poor quality at the same time, and I've been guilty of this, of doing stuff in a lower level market but too higher quality,
Okay.
right? So it's finding, it's knowing that market and doing your costs, budgets, design to complement that market. And if you're doing something for first time buyers, even if you put gold taps on it, they still can't pay any more for it because they've only got a limited budget and a limited mortgage. So you just flush your money down the toilet if you over spec it. So don't fall into that trap. And as I said, good design does not need to cost a lot of money. Often, whatever you do, buyers are going to come and tweak it anyway.
Mm.
You can do things with the best intentions of the world. We did a north-facing, large, I think first or second floor flat in a nice mansion block in an area of London called Earl's Court, north facing. Because it was north facing, obviously it didn't get a lot of light.
Yes.
Because it didn't get a lot of light, I put a light oak wood floor down.
Okay.
The Russian lady who bought it stained it all dark.
Okay. Yeah.
You know,
You're never going to please
you
everybody.
you can't exactly. But the thing is, you know, did I do the right thing? When she walked in, saw it, it seemed light and airy. Would she have bought it? You know, if it had been a dark floor, it might look too dark and it might have put her off. You don't know the answer to that. You know, all you know is what you did. Um, but people always tweak things, and quite rightly so. They want to personalize it. But in essence, what you're doing is you're giving them a blank canvas, but they have to like that canvas.
To start with, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So in the market at the moment, for many people, it's slowing down. There's fewer buyers. Even some developers are slowing down their construction. How do you find things when you work in the prime parts of like London and other places as well? Do you find that market equally slows and adjusts, or is it really a completely different market where it's not impacted by the same kind of macroeconomics?
That's a really good question. So, obviously interest rates are very high, and that whatever anybody says, that affects all levels of the market. I was speaking yesterday to a very high-end, bespoke, private agent in one of the best parts of London called Jeremy. And Jeremy was saying that at the moment he's got six or seven properties on his books, and these are all turnkey, beautiful addresses, beautiful properties, etc., etc., etc. You know, when times were good, he would have been, really excited because, fantastic, collection of properties that he has to sell. At the moment, very, very few inquiries. His phone's not ringing. Very few. Whatever anybody says, it is difficult at all levels of the market.
Mm.
Now, are there is the higher end less sensitive to higher interest rates than the rest of the market? Possibly a little bit, especially if the property is really special. So, you know, obviously, for it not to be sensitive, you're really looking for cash buyers
Hmm.
who are not affected by interest rates as much. But a lot of wealthy people, they want to have their money working for them. So, whereby before they could be borrowing at 1 or 2%, now it's 6 or 7%, right? So it's a big hit, huge hit. Yes, if you go to, some of the really smart new build developments or properties which very rarely come on the market, yes, they will be less price sensitive than other things. But and the high end agents will always say that the right things which are special will always sell, and they're absolutely right in that. I went to look this morning actually at a friend of mine who's got a penthouse in Eaton Square that he's happy to sell, right? Beautifully done development. Did it for his own taste, but beautifully executed. And and I hope he sells it well. And at the moment, there's not a lot of stock available at that level for that type of thing. So it depends on the rarity of the property.
Yeah, so certain locations, certain type of properties where they're very few and far between when they come up, there'll always be a special category and a demand for those. So with the current climate, the way the market is, how long in your mind do you see it staying like this and in a kind of a slower state, if you like?
They're hoping that interest rates are going to come. No, inflation is going to come down. The target is to get down to about 3%, right? That's what the government says. It's not necessarily what the Bank of England says, but it's what the government says. They will reach that 3%. The question is when. Will it be? Their hope is to reach that this side of Christmas. My instinct will be the other side of Christmas. As inflation comes down, then of course interest rates will come down. I would have thought that if you talk about like the new comfortable level will start from sort of April, May next year when things will have calmed down. There'll be possibly 3, 4%. I don't know, something like that. Your guess is as good as mine. Uh, but that I think will become the new normal until whether inflation will come down again to how it used to be, so interest rates can then do the same. Again, your guess is as good as mine. Also, need to bear in mind we've got an election coming up. Um, that affects stability, that affects perception. The chances are we're going to get a Labour government at the moment, and how fiscally astute they're going to be. At the moment, they are talking the talk to, their chancellor is, or shadow chancellor is being very prudent. So let's wait and see.
So, Alan, you've more than 2 decades you've been doing this. You've probably seen huge amounts of change happen in construction, in development, in property sales during that time. What's your what's your guesstimate of what the next 10 years might entail, what that might look like, what changes we might see in terms of for property developers?
Well, I think the main thing is 10 years ago you didn't really have, or 20 years ago especially, you hardly had any property TV programs on air.
Mm.
Now you can't put the TV on without it being something about new builds,
Yeah,
development, sales, this, that, or the other, and of course all the other YouTube bits and bobs. So the sophistication from the buyer is very different to what it was before. Before it was Magnolia and Formica, and people were happy. Uh, uh,
I
you
remember
know,
the days well.
you know. Um, to Today it's very different. You know, take a simple thing. You um, taps, right? Why would you now have a cold tap and a hot tap? You know, even in a low budget property, you'd have a single tap with a mixer, whether it's for a bath or for uh, a sink, and especially for a sink, right? Where before that was perceived as being a real luxury. You just have two taps. Um, so it and those things don't need to cost. I don't know whether they cost more. They might even cost less because you only need one tap, right? Um, but the way that things are designed, and you know, if somebody's buying, a first time flat, let's take a one bed flat at, a few hundred thousand. The thing that the developer needs to appreciate is that client, that buyer, they have choice. Will they buy one from their development or another development? So that they're not going to just go into the first one they see. They're going to look at different others. And what are they going to compare? They're going to compare, obviously, size, finishes, layout, look, feel, the whole shebang. So, it's you know, people say, it, we're only selling these, one bed flats for 500,000. There's no point spending any time on design. But the thing is that these buyers, they're a lot more design savvy and will make their decision, more design led than they used to. And I come back to it costs the same amount of money to put one color on the wall as another color. The question is
Yes.
which color, and the
Yes.
space planning and the layouts. It's not a matter of expense or cost. It's a matter of getting the best for that particular uh, need and
Yeah.
size available.
I think one thing that will probably change in our space that will make a big difference in the coming years is artificial intelligence. Just things like the visualization of what something might look like, people being able to kind of almost experience and walk through that with headsets to understand what something might look like, and then that way it's almost creating to order. And like for example, we talked about wall colors. Well, at a click of a finger, you could change the color of a wall and see if they prefer that, and then customize and creating things based on demand in that way. I think artificial intelligence will probably open up a lot new avenues for us as developers. Um, so a final question before we wrap up. You've got a huge amount of experience in the sectors we've talked about. And if you were to start out again today as a property developer, what type of property would you look for? What would you like to create as a product? What would you focus on to start a property development business if you were starting that in, say, 2024?
I think it boils down to risk. And you want to do something where you're going to limit your risk because you know you're going to make mistakes, you know it's going to be a learning curve, and you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. So I would keep it really, really simple. You know, if on your first one, you don't need to move any walls, you maybe make the door heights bigger, you may swing them in a different way. So when you open them, you're going straight into the room rather than a
Mhm.
door that you then have to go around. Um, you may tweak the layout of the kitchen, um, but you're not having to move any of the walls.
Yes.
That as a basic. So because in essence is more of a light redecoration and cleanup than anything else. Then as you gain more confidence, then obviously to then do more structural stuff.
Yes.
The the thing is that what's really important, and I come back to the prototype, you don't have a prototype, right? So the question is, who are you going to use for your design and for your build? Because, as I said, I've had people where I've had to go to the bank and pay them cash at the end of each week, and then I've had to go back when the property's been sold to fix all the problems that they hadn't noticed because I didn't have a proper project manager. So to understand your own skills, because you know you can often think I don't want the expense of a project manager, but they're there to watch your back and protect you from the contractor. And that doesn't mean to say that the relationship with the contractor is not good, but the thing is, if you've never done stuff before, you have no idea what things should cost or how long they should take or what they should be. And so I would, possibly spend a bit more on your professional team than you would initially think about. If the project is more than £100,000 of construction, uh, having a project manager, a quantity surveyor, and one of those to look after the contract administration, because the builder will always look for more time and for more extras, and that contract will need tweaking all the time. So you need to keep on top of that because you don't want to then have a big fallout at the end. So it's keeping things on the straight and narrow with the right team in order to help sort out the issues as they evolve. And that's there's no surprises there. That's part of the game.
Yeah, Alan, there's some great advice there. I really appreciate you giving up your time and sharing some of that with us today. Enormous amounts of knowledge, some great nuggets there as well. So once again, thank you so much for that. What's the best way for people to reach out to you and connect to you?
Well, I'd say as a first step, look at the website. It's www.landmass.co.uk. That's spelled LANDMASS. If there's a section there that you can fill in for any inquiries, or you can email me directly at Alan, ALAN, at landmass, LANDMASS.co.uk.
So Alan, is it just the prime areas of London that you work in, or will you open to working in different locations?
So we have two sides to the business, development and services. So on the development, where I'm working with investors, and if people are interested in investing, in some of our projects in London. Obviously, delighted to have a conversation. But that's the area that I know in relation to being able to design what I think is the right type of product for the market, where I'm handling other people's money. You know, you've obviously got to know your patch. But on the design consultancy side, we can work anywhere in the world, and certainly anywhere in the UK. You know, for instance, I've got a meeting tomorrow with a friend of mine who's doing a large development in Devon, and you know he's looking for help not just on the design side, but also on the greater vision. You know, because in every project you need what I call a conductor of the orchestra with the vision, putting the team together. And you know, I've got friends that I'm had discussions with up in Manchester, uh, Birmingham. You know, it really doesn't matter. The question is whether we can add value to other people's projects, and whether it makes sense. But if we can have that, if they think that we could potentially add value, then clearly be happy to have a conversation.
Alan, thank you again, once again, so much for your time and taking the time out to join us today. Thank you.
My pleasure, Sarge, and look forward to helping anybody who needs any help.
Thank you.